Reaching out for something you got to feel, or clutching to what you thought was real. Kicking at a dead horse pleases you. No way of showing your gratitude. So many things you don't want to do. What is and what have you got to lose? What the hell? What the hell? What is it you think you're gonna find? Hypocrite, hypocrite. Boredom's a tip to the boring mind. Struggle with it. It's what you find. Struggle with it. You're ruined. Struggle with it. You seal your own coffin. The struggling within.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pirate Radio. I'm your host, who still needs zero introduction. Hello and welcome to this fantastic Friday night, or if you're listening later on, whatever day or night it actually is when you listen to this. We are in war. Despite what the president and the inner circle want to say, when you drop bombs on another country, people, they tend to see that as an act of war. I guess we could get into the legality of the terms, but that's nonsensical because we all know we're at war. And the thing is has the war blown back upon the American public? We already have somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen American soldiers who have been killed, with the latest being 6 members of a KC-135 refueler that apparently had a mid-air collision with another one of some sort, although the details are not fully known. The fact of the matter is it went down over Iraq, and all 6 souls on board did not make it. We don't like it, but it is nothing surprising when soldiers die in war. That doesn't make it necessarily it's obviously not a good thing. It's not an acceptable thing, but it is a thing in a war. But we've had no less than 3 instances in the last week, and 4 if you go back to the start of the war with the, I believe it was a Sudanese immigrant who became an American citizen who shot up a bar outside or inside Austin, Texas with a AR-15. Pretty clear what his motives were when he said the hoodie that said property of Allah on it. But we've also had 3 more since then. We had 2 brothers from suburban Pennsylvania drive up to New York City, and another protest that was happening. They went to that protest yelling out Aloha Snack Bar and throwing makeshift homemade explosives, lighting fuses, throwing them. They did not go off because they're apparently tarded. But they were able to light 2 fuses, 2 different devices, throw them. They were apparently wrapped. There was an explosive that then was wrapped with nuts and bolts, I guess, nails, ball bearings. Basically, it's an anti-personnel. It's a grenade. IED, grenade, anti-personnel mine, whatever you want to call it. The idea is it blows up, bang, goes off. Yes, QP, you're correct. It was not 2 brothers. Initially, it was reported as 2 brothers. They are separate retards who found themselves on Retard Mountain, apparently, all at the behest of radical Islam. So that story from the New York fellas is interesting to me. Because of some of the reporting that was reported or divulged, that at least one of them had traveled to Turkey fairly recently, had stayed for 3 months, and they wrote it as traveled to Turkey and other terrorist training spots, something to that effect. I found that very interesting because you have the former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, who randomly to me and to a lot of people in a speech pointed towards Turkey as the quote unquote next Iran. This is while the Iran attacks are taking place. And then he's already, I understand he's not in the government currently. He's a businessman now. But when you're a former government official with ties directly to the government that is in charge, when you say things like this, it carries some weight. And the Turks are not to be trifled with. One, they are a NATO member. Two, they have a lot of people and hardware and are kind of nuts themselves. But throughout history, you can look at what it takes to take on whether it was the Eastern Roman Empire with Constantinople, or if it's been the Ottoman Empire, or now even Turkey. If you want to fuck with Asia Minor, you're probably going to get fucked with back. Let's just put it that way. But that was pretty interesting to me that they reported it that way. So are we looking at some sort of kind of false flaggy stuff? That's kind of what I'm getting at with a lot of this. Like, why would that be relevant to the thing? Because in the same thing, the same article, and then later on, when they perp walked this kid, the one who actually threw the bombs, the long-haired hippie-looking douche, they both of these guys claim to be inspired by ISIS, whatever that means. Just because I'm inspired by James Hetfield does not mean I'm a member of Metallica. So that's an interesting way to frame things. But also, last I checked, I don't think Metallica threw any bombs on anybody or tried to kill anyone. So there's also that. But my point is that you're ISIS inspired, so you do these random failed bombings at this point. ISIS are Sunnis. They're Sunni Muslims. Iranians are Shiite Muslims. Those two don't really get along. The Shiites fought ISIS. The Shiites helped us destroy ISIS, or at least, most of it. So pledging his allegiance to ISIS is kind of odd. You then had the Old Dominion attack, in which another pathetic loser of a human being, who, mind you, this is the craziest story ever. So Old Dominion is in Virginia, who coincidentally is trying to pass an assault weapons ban, or may have passed it. I don't know. It looks like they're going to pass it. But the shooter in the Old Dominion attack not only was an ISIS sympathizer and was convicted, but was let out, but also was able to just buy a stolen weapon from a person named Kenya Chapman, 32, of Smithfield, Virginia. Is being charged with 3 counts of making false statements while purchasing a firearm and 1 count of selling firearm without proper license. So Chapman allegedly stole a firearm and illegally sold it to a convicted terrorist. Mind you, listen to that. A convicted terrorist is out walking free. This is a person whose name I'm not going to say because they're a piece of shit, who is in this country, from what I understand, illegally, and was definitely an immigrant of some sort, and then is a convicted terrorist who not only was let out, but was still in the country. So let's let all that just kind of sit and stew. Who was convicted of aiding ISIS in some form or fashion, which is just wild. And then this person, this Chapman fella, stole a firearm and then sold it to a convicted terrorist. Now, we don't know that this upstanding citizen named Kenya Chapman actually knew that this person was a convicted terrorist. But, I mean, it's fuck-ups all over. And, sold a Glock 44 22 caliber for $100. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. So that's weird. I mean, when you start looking at these things and you go, okay, is this just planned? Is this like some sort of like Manchurian candidate type stuff? Is this, MK Ultra type things of like you have a convicted terrorist who not only is let out but is walking around and no one even cares? No one, at least this piece of shit, unfortunately, was able to murder one person in that ROTC class, but then the ROTC class went to work with apparently fists and an edged weapon and ended this son of a bitch, which is just chef's kiss kind of stuff. Good work, gentlemen, and a possible gentle lady, but definitely gentlemen in fucking that person up and ending them. You then have a synagogue attack in Michigan, which this fella had his family was recently killed in, I believe, Lebanon, and claimed some sort of affiliation or love for Hezbollah, which, again, these things are very weird. When I say false flags, I'm not saying like no one died. I'm not claiming that no one was killed. I'm not saying that these things are not horrific or downplaying the seriousness or the severity of these acts, possible terroristic acts. I say possible terroristic because there is a definition of what terrorism is. Does it fall under it? Probably, but let's just say, okay, these terroristic acts. I convinced myself. But my point to this is when you have people who travel abroad, hang out for a while, and then are watching ISIS videos, allegedly, according to them, they're doing all of this stuff. And, QP, that's a very good point. But I think the point is like, okay, so these guys, I don't know. Again, that leads to the whole false flag of how did ISIS do it in Sterling, Virginia, 3 hours from Newport News? How did they meet? Possibly the same way we met. There's that, but also, not to say that QP and I hang out on terrorism websites or anything like that, but which we don't. I mean, I guess it depends on who's in charge at the moment of what constitutes a terrorist or not. But it's probably a small community. But it's also, it lends itself to when people are radicalized, when they are looking into terrorist groups. I mean, legitimate terrorist groups. I'm not talking about like the NRA or anything like that. I'm not talking about some stretch. I'm talking about, ISIS and ISIS groups, Al Qaeda groups, Boko Haram's, insert actual terrorist group here who does terrorist type shit on a regular basis, makes flags, does all the stuff. When they're hanging out on those websites, when they're watching those videos, it's really weird to me that all of a sudden there's this blind spot in which the federal authorities can't see, but maybe they're too busy trying to false flag, regular, like blood-born American citizens into trying to, kidnap a governor of Michigan. I don't know. But this is all very, very just coincidental, very just kind of, they just happened to, they just were all of a sudden in all of these things. And it's like, you can't tell me that there's not any sort of level of coordination going on here. And then the timing is the other thing of like, this is being sold to us as this is blowback from our war in Iran because we're attacking Iran, and Iran is a majority Muslim country, that of course these Muslims have been activated in these sleeper cells and they're going to start committing these acts. The problem again is that when you're talking about ISIS and ISIS inspired people, ISIS are Sunni, period. They're Sunni Muslim. They're not Shiite, just like Al Qaeda was Sunni Muslim. That was part of the fake narrative and fake the disinformation about why we had to go into Iraq in 2003 and overthrow Saddam, because Saddam was a Sunni. He had ties to Al Qaeda. They're both Sunni. They both hate the West. So, therefore, by proxy, somehow, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, is going to arm the Sunni Al Qaeda terrorists, who then are going to come over here and use a dirty bomb, and they're going to use chemical weapons, and they're going to use all this stuff. So, then when we invaded, we left the Shiites alone. Later on, we allied with various Shiite sects and went and fought against the Sunnis. That was before Barack Obama created ISIS, who was supposed to go into Syria, go west into Syria. Instead, they went east into Iraq, and that was a big problem. Like I've talked about before, where do you think ISIS got all those brand new nice Toyota trucks? They didn't just take them from a local dealer in Iraq. So there's that part of it. But when this all is like just one of those things of, we're talking about, if this is because of Iran, it's not making sense. And yes, I understand that. So as QP put in the chat, perhaps this is just an excuse for jihad. Does some dude who tried to join ISIS need an excuse? Yes, they do actually need an excuse. Here's the thing. Why? See if I can come up with an analogy here. It's tough. You know, when you're drawing these different lines of these different tribes, if we were to go back to, you know, the 12th century or something like that, and you have somewhere like the Holy Roman Empire, and you have, Christianity has taken over, Catholicism has become one. The idea that you're going to wage war on behalf of the Pope when you're a Protestant and you don't believe in the Pope is pretty wild that you would do that. So this is kind of the same thing of the idea that you're going to be activated as a Sunni Muslim in the name of ISIS, that on behalf of the Shiites of Iran, it just doesn't make sense. Because if that were true, and you were this braggadocious wannabe terrorist who doesn't know how to make a fucking bomb that'll go off, wouldn't you just say that? Like, I was inspired by ISIS, but this is for the people of Iran. This is for the Ayatollah. This is for the whatever. Like, you would say that, right? Like, wouldn't that be the thing? Why would it not be the thing that you said? So, I think what is happening here is these attacks are being used to try to gin up support for a very unpopular war in Iran. And that is possibly going to work because most of the American populace is not really hip to all of this. The other thing is that, like, if you were going to, I don't want to get into like getting deep into the weeds of like what you would do and start naming targets, but if one were to become a terrorist or a radical, if you wanted to create mass chaos, if you really wanted to do something wild, you would do something big. I think you would do something much bigger than kind of one-on-one things, and I don't know. Maybe I just think bigger than these guys, but it's one of those things that a lot of you listening to this, and a lot of you in the chat right now have probably gamed out things when you go to public spaces, when you're thinking about going to public spaces. You've gamed out what can happen, what could happen, and thinking that what you would do, egress, ingress, things of that nature, what have you. Let's see here. I'm not, so there's a little bit of confusion. I'm not saying these attacks are necessarily manufactured. What I'm saying is they're being hijacked for a narrative that is untrue. It's just like the Iran is a week away from nuclear weapons for the last 40 years. Okay. Is Iran seeking a nuclear weapon? Probably right now they are. There's this whole retarded narrative of they enriched up to 60%. That means they're going after a bomb. And it's like, no. 100% means they're going after a bomb. 60% means, hey, we have the capability here. But it's like, one of the wild things about like if you take a car and you want to get a car to do 240 miles an hour, okay? The Bugatti Veyron back in the day, 20 years ago, give or take, was the fastest production car in the world at 242 miles an hour. I think it had 1,100 horsepower, maybe 1,200 horsepower, 4 turbos, all of this stuff, right? Well, fantastic car, crazy. The thing is that it had 1,200 horsepower to get to that 240, but it only needed like 400 horsepower to get to 200, something like that. So it needed all of that extra horsepower just to get the additional 40 to 42 miles per hour to be a 240 mile an hour car. It's the same thing with nuclear weapons. Just because you're at 60% means fuck all, really. Going from 60 to that 100 to the weapons grade is a huge monumental task that you have not even begun to tackle yet. Not even begun to tackle yet. So that's a fake, false narrative designed to try to get us to be okay with attacking Iran, which again, in June, like most of us said at the time, and we're saying, it's not about nuclear weapons, it's not about their nuclear program, it's about regime change. And of course, all of them had to say, all of the political leaders had to say, it's not about regime change, it's just about their nuclear program. And here we are, 6-7 months later, full-blown regime change. We've killed 2 Ayatollahs, severely wounded a 3rd, killed a whole bunch of little girls, killed a whole bunch of IRGC guys, killed a whole bunch of their family, killed a whole bunch of people, so much so that you have the people of Iran in the streets in liberal Tehran, liberal to them. These are the true Persians. These are the people that are supposed to rise up. These are what the people it's supposed to be for, are in the streets with the flag of Iran, championing the regime because they don't like bombs falling on their fucking head. So, good job, everyone. You've united the people of Iran against the West. Outstanding. Good job. There's a lot that is made about most of you have heard about General Wesley Clark talking about the memo in which he was privy to, or was told about, I guess I should say. It was a classified memo that someone told him about, that we had a plan in 2002 to knock off 7 countries in 5 years, right? Regime change, 7 countries in 5 years. You can also go back to the early 90s and Benjamin Netanyahu, talking about how Iran is they're right there. They're about to have a nuclear bomb. They're this close to a nuclear bomb. By spring, by summer at latest, they're going to have a nuclear bomb. They'll have the bomb. They'll have atomic bombs. Bombs. Okay. Well, if we're going to talk about who was right versus who was wrong, it would appear to me that the evidence is firmly in favor of General Wesley Clark, since now the last holdout, now we didn't attack Sudan, but there is a proxy state who's helping Sudan fall. Sudan was the easiest domino to click over. They're just a shithole. But if we're talking about the 7 countries, well, number 7 now is being regime changed. And yet, there are no nuclear weapons within Iran. So, if you want to say that Wesley Clark and what he said is complete nonsense because it didn't happen in the specific timeline, then I guess those same people, you have to look at Benjamin Netanyahu and say, well, he's a fucking liar too. Okay? But of course, that won't happen because these are the same people who wanted to tell you that, oh, we can bomb Iran. It's no big deal. This thing won't get bigger. We're not going to be World War III. And then the bombs start falling, and it's like things are happening, and Israel's blowing them up. And then after the war's over, they're like, see, we told you we were right. And now those same people looking at you, Konstantin Kisin of trigonometry, all of a sudden you're like, I don't know where this goes. This could be a bigger thing. Yeah, because everybody told you this is exactly what it was about. It was softening everyone up to do an operation like this. And now we're talking about 2,500 Marines on some godforsaken fucking island in the north of Iran and sending 2,500 Marines to take over said island. So now we're talking about boots on the ground. Now, that's not to say, like Arthur and I talked about last week, we obviously know that there are some actual American boots on the ground, whether it's CIA, special operations, or both. There are some boots on the ground within the boundaries of Iran. We're not fools. We understand at least a basic idea of how we conduct wars in this day and age. But when we're talking about boots on the ground, we're talking about an actual fighting force with infantry, ground support, armor, the whole 9 yards, okay? We're talking about an amphibious landing on a fucking island. When is the last time this country made an amphibious landing? Korea would have been technically an amphibious landing. I don't know that we did an amphibious landing in Vietnam. I think we just kind of showed up. Well, we were already there. They had the South. But I'm pretty sure that MacArthur decided to hit the west of Korea with an amphibious landing and make a beachhead and then fight from the middle. I don't know. Not familiar enough with Grenada Merc. Maybe. Not sure. Could have been paratroopers in Grenada like it was in Panama. I'm not sure. The point is this shit isn't easy. And the idea that Iran is just some wounded duck who's unable to defend itself is asinine. Because my thought is, so if we look at the greater Iran war, and I know I'm devolving into Iran, but that's really kind of the crux of this whole thing. Whether these are false flag events in the form of like media coverage and in the form of ginning up greater support for an unpopular war, or ginning up support for a ground invasion because we feel like we're under attack here by radical Muslim extremists, even though they're from the wrong tribe. The point is this all comes back to Iran. Even if, let's say that I'm wrong and they don't care, Sunni, Shiite, we're all just Muslim brothers, and so we're going to take up arms against the evil, big, bad Satan known as America. Fine. It all comes back to the hub is Iran. My thought, if you're Iran, you really just don't have to lose. And you can sit there and you can hang out and you can take all of the hits. You can rope-a-dope, in essence. With the idea and the understanding, there's no shortage of reporting from people in the know, generals and big brass, talking about how our munitions level are very, 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 very low. Our bomb level is very, very low. We don't have a just endless supply of JDAMs and other bombs out there. Tomahawk, same way. We don't have this endless supply. And plus, trying to get all of the bombs that we say we're able to ramp up production, and we can have this endless supply of bombs. Getting those bombs from here to there takes time. And you're going to go through all of the bombs before you can get them over there. So if you're Iran, you understand this. You also understand that you're not going to fly, and, small tier, the final F-14s got smoked this past week. So, that's kind of a sad thing. But the idea that you're going to go air-to-air combat against either the United States or Israel is just it's a suicide mission. But, so if you're Iran, you have to understand kind of your place in this whole thing. And you're trying to draw the your enemies, your belligerents, if you will. If I'm Iran, I want to draw you into a ground campaign. I want you to come over here because I know the terrain. I know how large this country is. I know what I know, and you don't know it. and that's not to say that the Marine Corps is not a very, very efficient fighting machine who kills everything in their path and is able to take some territory and make a beachhead and take the island. I'm more than confident that 2,500 Marines would take that island within a week, if that. The point is that if I'm Iran, I need to draw you into a fist fight. I don't need to get bombed from the air all the time. I want to fight you in the streets. I want you in the cities. I want to pot shot you. You want to fight? You'll get a fucking fight. I don't know what the Iranians actually know, but I do know, at least I know within the United States, there is no appetite for a bunch of dead soldiers. We love our soldiers. We respect our soldiers, and we would rather them not be dead. And if we're going to have to suffer casualties in a war, we want it to be a righteous war. That's the biggest problem you have, retards, when you start comparing everything to World War II. World War II was the last and possibly only righteous war, okay? Yes, we can get into like different things and myths and this and that, but the idea, the post-World War II narrative that is held up until now, or at least it still is holding up somewhat, but it's under some scrutiny, is that the Nazis were the bad guys, we were the good guys, we went in there and we took out the Nazis, we vanquished evil, and hoorah the West and hoorah the United States. We are the greatest. We fight for what is righteous. We fight for the little guy. We saved the Jews. We got rid of Nazism and fascism, and we saved Europe. We saved France. We saved the United Kingdom. We were able to vanquish the Imperial Japanese, who were allied with those horrible, murderous, horrific bastards. And we are the good guys, and we established the order back in the world. The war to end all wars, if you will, but not minor excursions. This was the last one. We vanquished the evil. Well, this is the problem when that's the narrative and when you always want to talk about World War II and how we're righteous, because here's the thing. No one looks at this as a righteous war. There might be a few people that are like, yeah, this is righteous and we have to do this because X, Y, or Z, because the Iranians did all of these things they killed Marines in 1983 and they sponsored terrorism throughout the Middle East and the globe and this, that, or the other, and They give money to Hamas and Hezbollah, which, I don't know, the Israeli government gave money to Hamas as well. So there's that. But we're not going to talk about that today. Apparently, I don't know. Have we ever tried just leaving them the fuck alone? Are we thoroughly convinced that... I do have a solution for all of this, okay? If you want a peaceful Middle East, give them all nuclear weapons. I know it sounds crazy. Why would we give a whole bunch of crazy Muslim countries nuclear weapons? Well, here's the thing. If everybody's got a knife, there's 5 dudes standing there and 5 guys got a knife, and it's all the same size knife, well, the calculus just changed. Do you really want to get in a fist fight with this guy or any sort of physical altercation? Because he's got a knife. You got a knife too, but he has a knife as well. This could go badly. So give everybody in the Middle East nuclear weapons. I see this becoming sort of a broader thing. You had the Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, who is in, I think it's southeastern Iraq, who is an Ayatollah. Yes, there are Ayatollahs outside of Iran. Think of them as like cardinals within the Catholic religion, if you will, not equating the religions, but just kind of an analogy here. Let's see. He declared fatwa for the boundaries of Iran. What does that mean? That means that he called on all of the Shiites within the boundaries of Iran to fight us in Israel, to take up arms and defend their homeland, their territory. Okay? Why does this matter? Because al-Sistani is the reason in 2004 he wanted one man, one vote in the new Iraq. And our regime at the time, the Bush administration, was like, yeah, We don't really know about that because we just know we're going to end up with a Shiite country, probably that's allied with Iran. And so they're like, yeah, I don't think we should do that. And Al Sistani said, okay, that's fine. And he called out to all Shiites to take to the streets and demand one man, one vote. And guess what happened? They all went to the streets and they all demanded one man, one vote. And to keep the peace, George W. Bush said, oh, fuck, one man, one vote. That's cool. So this man holds a lot of power. And I can't remember if I said it out loud. He actually had a higher religious ranking. He was a higher ranking religious official than the Ayatollah Khamenei, who we just killed. Okay? So he holds a little more weight in the area and in the globe if you're a Shiite. Okay? We are teetering on him losing his patience. And if he calls in the Shiites to take up arms, a fatwa, a global fatwa, that's a problem. You know, there's something like, God, I think it's like 30 million Shiites across the globe with a very sizable population within the United States. Can't remember the exact figures. I might be wrong on that, but there are millions of them, and they're all over the place. That could be a problem. You know, plenty of videos that have come out, I think, in Dearborn, Michigan, or Michigan, or whatever, up there, you know, where all the Muslims are for some reason, but that's fine. Stay up there. Of local Muslim clerics, I guess is what they're called, talking about how basically showing their love for Khamenei and paying their respects to his death. Okay, this is a religious leader. These are not world leaders. These are religious leaders. We don't really understand that here for some reason. You know, when you talk about the Sunnis versus Shiites, the Sunnis like to have imams, which are basically like reverends or preachers, and they're kind of, you know, they kind of have a local guy, if you will. Well, the Shiites have a international guy or guys, and that's a problem. That's a real problem. You know, you look at a guy like Osama bin Laden. He was not a religious figure. He held no religious authority whatsoever. But he was still able to command and control an Al-Qaeda group around the globe. We're dealing with a different monster here, and we're being very cavalier about it. And I really, it would be nice if we use this instead of to scare the American people. If we use this to gin up support for deporting all of these crazy fucks, there's that. I mean, that would be nice. It would be nice if you had a former terrorist who, for some reason, was out walking the streets, if we just deported him instead of him being able to purchase a firearm illegally and kill one person, but then get dealt with in the most righteous fashion ever by a bunch of ROTC dudes. It would be nice if that one guy were still alive and he didn't get killed by this piece of shit who should have never been out. But hey, you know, I've been called an idealist, a pragmatist, also been called a extremist, so there's that. And yes, some of these dudes, in my analogy, are on religious meth, I guess is one thing. But, you know, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and define religious meth. I mean, you could almost call Zionists religious meth. You know, they've caused a lot of, indirectly, I would say, have caused a lot of death in the Middle East. There's plenty of religious, like, zealots out there. The Christian nationalist is a religious zealot. I don't agree with Zionism or Christian nationalism. I don't want to see those people hurt, and I don't believe that Israel shouldn't exist. That's between y'all. But the idea that Zionism is some sort of benefit for the Jewish population around the world, I think the evidence is pretty clear that it's not. I think it's fomented a lot of hate against not only Jews in Israel, but Jews in the broader world. I don't think it's helping right now. You know, you could call that religious meth. Because there's a lot of secular Jews that are catching the ire of some others because of Zionism and what it's producing currently. Kind of a whole different debate, whole different discussion, but, I think the case can be made there. And just because you're against Zionism or you don't believe in Zionism or you don't believe that it's for the better of the people, that does not make me anti-Semitic, I should probably have to say, even though I'll probably get called anti-Semitic for saying that. But I don't see groups as monolith. I thought about tweeting earlier this week that when I criticize Israel, I'm only criticizing the 25% Arab population and just sending people in a death spiral. Because so many people who are like super pro-Israel, a lot of people who are super pro-Israel don't even know that it's not 100% Jewish, that there is a sizable Arab population. So there's that, which I think, I don't know. Mercury asks, Merc, why was Iran using drones hitting so many other countries? To show the vulnerabilities, I think, is the biggest thing. The trade-off for these monarchy countries in the Gulf region, the trade-off there of having our troops there and military bases there was for protection. And the Iranians have shown that we cannot provide said protection because they've been getting situational awareness and intelligence from the Chinese and the Russians on what targets to hit, what assets are there, and what assets are not there. And so they know, and they probably have the intel from weeks, months, days, whatever it is, of watching us take anti-ballistic missile batteries out of Qatar and UAE and Saudi and moving them to Israel. Makes sense you would move them to Israel. That's where you're going to catch the most missiles once this thing kicks off. So it's not an indictment of Israel or why we would do that. It kind of makes logistical sense. But if you're one of those Gulf countries and all of a sudden the trade-off was protection for minor occupation, if you will, well, one side's holding up their end of the bargain while the other side isn't. So it makes sense tactically to do that. All of those other countries don't like you anyway. All of those other countries, UAE, Qatar, Saudi, most of them, first of all, are Sunni, but they hate your guts. So fuck you. If I'm getting blown up, you're going to suffer a little bit too. There is some like fog of war stuff happening where people are claiming that some of the strikes that happened in, I think, Dubai may not have originated in Iran. I don't know that to be true. Again, it's fog of war stuff. One of the things too that lends this part of the false flaggy type stuff in the I don't know, co-opting a terror attack for another use, for a broader narrative. One of those other things, as we saw yesterday or the day before, the FBI warned that there is a vessel, potentially a vessel off the coast of California that has drones and what have you, and some sort of munitions, and an attack on the West Coast is very possible, and everybody needs to raise their, I guess we're going to come back with the terror threat level thing on the news. That has false flag written all fucking over it. Okay, so the idea that they believe there's a vessel out there, but they can't find said vessel. Okay, that means it's either very, very small or non-existent. You're telling me you can't find a naval vessel out there with all the technology we have, with all the military hardware we have, with all the satellites we have that are out there. We can't find a ship loaded for bear with drones and other attack weapons. Just stop. Just stop. That is not a viable threat whatsoever. That is nonsensical. And the FBI is going to tell that. This is not an indictment what I'm about to say is not an indictment of Israel necessarily, but the idea that this FBI story reminds me of this, okay? Mossad is very, very good at what they do, okay? Let's just start with that. They're very good at of gaining intelligence, using intelligence, all of the things. Mossad is just, that's what they do, okay? They're very well known for it. They're one of the top, if not the top intelligence agency of a country in the world. So the idea that they have a finger on the pulse of the nuclear program within Iran, which was underground, behind locked doors, the idea that they know exactly where they're enriched and exactly how much they have and exactly what level they're at, what step they're at before getting a nuclear weapon, but they completely missed the October 7th attack, which was right next door, is just a little too hard to believe. Okay? I don't know how October 7th was pulled off. I don't know. It feels like there needs to be a very deep dive investigation into that because it was literally one wall over. I don't know. But I'm going to kind of question the pulse you have, or the finger on the pulse you have of a nuclear program within another country that they know the consequences of said nuclear program being found out are not good. I don't know. You're talking about an attack launched from a place in which you have full operational control of all of the borders, including a full blockade at sea to which you're not even allowed to fish. I don't know, man. If that's all true, then you better hope the Iranians didn't hire some Hamas guys, or don't hire some Hamas guys, to hide their nuclear program, because apparently you'll never fucking find it. Now, the FBI thing, I've lost faith in the FBI years ago, but especially under Kash Patel. I mean, maybe, here's a thought though, maybe the reason that they don't know where the boat is because that boat also has a box of Epstein files on it and they can't see it. So it means it doesn't exist. Like some sort of cloaking device. As if you have an Epstein file on you, the FBI is like fucking John Cena. Right? Maybe it's that thing. I don't know. All seems too convenient. Let's just put it that way. Let's all try to grow up. Let's all try to remember the things we heard when we were, maybe in high school or just out of, maybe a little way out of, in 2001 and 2 and 3, when we were talking about the Iraq War. Although there's probably a lot of you who, I don't fault you for being for the Iraq War. I fault you if you're still for it. But there's a lot of you that probably saw the Iraq War, were like, yeah, let's kick that guy's ass. He's got it coming. Fair enough. I get it. Then we got mired in it. You're like, well, it doesn't look like we have an objective. I don't know we're doing this. But there's a lot of you that probably still think that Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons on his people. Let's just look at the timeline of that. I was critical of Obama in his red line comment then when it came out, allegedly, or that it came out and we were being told that Bashar al-Assad then used chemical weapons on his people. But if we're looking at the bigger picture, Barack Obama wanted to launch a full-scale invasion of Syria, and the people of this country said hell to the no, and it was so unpopular, he launched a covert war instead of a full-blown war. And that's where ISIS came from, among other groups, okay? So if you're Bashar al-Assad, it's not going great, but you're holding. You have a civil war within your country. You've got Russian support. You're holding your own. You've got air superiority. And so far, you're fine. You probably understand what's going on, But it's more of a small scale thing, civil war again, right? So if you're Assad, and you hear the president of the United States, mind you, Assad speaks English. He spent a lot of time in Europe, or a lot of time in the UK, London, be specific. If you're Assad and you hear the president of the United States get asked a question about chemical weapons, which is a weird question to ask, mind you, but if you hear the president of the United States get asked the question of what would you do if, I forget the exact phrasing in the question, but basically what would you do if Assad used chemical weapons on his people, and he says that would be a red line. That would be a red line right there. That would be my red line. Something to that effect. And then a week later, I'll be goddamned if you didn't use chemical weapons on your own people. That makes zero sense if you're Assad. Why would you give the president of the United States and the commander-in-chief of the most powerful army and military this world has ever seen, why would you give him a reason when you're not losing the war in your country? Why would you give him the reason? Why would you cross this red line? Does that make sense to you? Assad was not a stupid man, okay? I don't know that he was a brilliant man, but he's not a stupid man. He's not Maduro. Maduro's a fucking idiot. Assad is not stupid. He's educated in the West. He has at least a broad general understanding of the West, okay? This is not some head chopper that came out of the fucking desert. None of that makes sense. You're being propagandized to. You're being conditioned for a greater expansion of war. That's what this is. That's my point. The idea that I can use a few things through the Middle East, I can use a few things that pertain to the Middle East and play you as a fool and think you're stupid and not understand the difference between a Shiite and a Sunni. Let's be smarter, guys. And let's, I don't know, maybe talk to your neighbors about it too. And maybe try to save a boomer. I don't know. I think it's made it onto Facebook what's going on, so there may be no hope for the boomers, but you can always try, you know? You can always try. It's to no avail, but you can always try. Anyway. I was going to get into some 2A stuff in Virginia, but it's too depressing, and Minnesota and all of those, and I don't know, man. I got friends in both states, and it's not looking good, and my heart goes out to you. Get the hell out, man. That's all I got to say. Get the hell out of those shitholes. I understand if you want to stay and fight, but man, you might actually have to literally fight. Anyway, boys and girls, friends of all sizes, shapes, and ethnicities, stay vigilant out there. Watch out for the muzzies. They punch above their weight. It's hard to tell a Sunni from a Shiite by eyeball, but I don't know. Watch out for them. Have an escape plan. Carry everywhere. I don't give a fuck where it is. Carry everywhere. Synagogues. Carry everywhere. Don't give a fuck about a sign. If a sign means more to you than carrying, good luck. Carry at your church. Carry everywhere. Be the sheepdog. Be the good guy. Don't be a goddamn sheep. And until next time, everybody take care. Watch your six. Get out there and train. And make yourselves harder to kill. Peace.